So if you don't know what data you've got or where it is, then you're kind of going in blind to trying to do any sort of analytics to improve your business efficiency. So yes, there is a big scary stick that you can smack people with to say if you get this wrong, it's not going to be good. But there's also this really like beacon of hope. If you get this right, you're going to have such insight into what the business can do, what it's doing, where the room for improvement is, and more importantly, where the data is.
Welcome to Data and AI Mastery, the podcast where we bring you cutting-edge insights, practical advice, and inspiring stories from the leaders shaping the future of data and AI across the globe. I'm your host, Raoul-Gabriel Urma, founder of Cambridge Spark, the leader in transformational data and AI upskilling, career development, and progression. In each episode, I will be diving into real-world case studies of companies harnessing the power of AI to drive innovation, reduce costs, and create new business opportunities. So whether you're an aspiring data scientist, AI engineer, or seasoned executive, this show is designed to give you the tools and knowledge to stay ahead in a world where data is transforming every aspect of business. Stay ahead, stay inspired, stay masterful. Welcome to Data and AI Mastery. Hi Sam, great to see you. How are you?
Hi, great, thanks. How are you?
Wonderful, and I'm super excited for our conversation because it's quite a unique topic, the topic of data privacy and governance, something that is not talked about enough. So I'd love to dig into this topic with you, Sam. So you're the VP Global Data Privacy and Governance, so that's quite a unique job title. So I'd love to find out a little bit, Sam, what does it entail and how is it that you started your career in the legal field? So you're a qualified UK solicitor and you're now in the data space. Tell us a bit more about this.
Yes, so I qualified as a solicitor 7 years ago now, and I always had a keen interest in commercial and corporate law. So I spent a lot of time in high street law firms working with organisations to help them with their all things business, really. And then upon qualifying, I fell into commercial property, and it was at that point I realised that type of law just wasn't for me at all. I just could not, it was a very much process-driven kind of checklists and the same thing over and over, which just didn't really appeal to me. So I literally fell into data protections. I'd briefly touched on it throughout previous jobs, but not in depth. And then I saw a role for an information compliance solicitor. So I just applied for it and got it, and basically found where my passion was. So I've spent the last 7 years building on my knowledge. It's quite interesting because when you speak to other lawyers, they're all in sort of, property, commercial, corporate, probate. You very rarely come across a data privacy lawyer. Well, a lot of data privacy professionals, but not many lawyers, unless you go to your big four kind of firms. So it is a bit of a niche, but I absolutely love it.
What do you find exciting about it? Like, because you said you're really passionate about it. What's the appeal?
No 2 days, I know it's really cliche, but no 2 days are the same. The laws are changing every day. My role is global, so it's not just UK or EU laws that we have to look at. It's literally everywhere. And although you see GDPR is kind of in the news a lot and there's a lot of noise around huge fines, it's not just Europe that have these regulations. Every single country around the world has their own approach. So you can kind of take one steer for one country, and when you look at the laws of another, it's not quite the same. So it's always changing and there's always something new to learn.
Great. So if we take a step back and, talk broadly about data governance and the issue of privacy being a component of it, can you tell us a little bit what are the key success factors to, run a robust data governance, process within an organization? What would you say is important to factor in?
Sure. So data governance is a hard sell to businesses because you can't always give a return on investment at the beginning. It's all kind of like ideology and it's all going to be great if we do this.
Actually, how do you think about return on investment with data governance before we dig into it?
It's tricky. It's not an easy conversation to have because when you ask for your budget and your people, you're kind of saying, if we get this wrong, there's an effect. And it's very difficult without having it in place to be able to demonstrate how good it can be. So things like, really good example, data retention, storage costs. If you've not got appropriate retention periods, 100% guaranteed the organisation is paying for more storage than it needs because, nobody's taking that action to, it's usually automated now, automatically delete data after a certain period. So it's really, the way I've always approached it is find a few quick wins. So things like storage, you could easily say, we can reduce the storage by X by implementing this, and that will save you Y across 3 years. And then you can say, this is data governance. This is a real life example of data governance. It's not just a team, sat in the background playing with tooling. This is real life impact on the business. I think a really key component to be successful data governance is your ownership and stewardship. So it's not a case of saying we're here to tell you what to do with data. It is you're empowered to do what you need to do with your job. You're responsible for this data domain. And these are the guardrails that you need to think about when people in your team or people in the data team come to you with questions. This is what we expect of you to be able to manage things in line with the strategy. So it is a really, really tricky area. So with privacy, really, they're not sexy subjects that the board want to talk about. And the impact, if you get it wrong, can be catastrophic for an organisation. So it's really important to have these conversations.
How bad can you get, actually?
So there's some huge fines now. GDPR is 4% of global turnover or 20 million euros, whichever is greater, potentially. That's for huge, really bad non-compliance. Interestingly, the EU AI Act is actually higher than that, which I think has gone kind of, you don't see that in the headlines. The EU AI Act has kind of quietly come into legislation with absolutely huge, huge, huge fines for getting it wrong. Not read a lot about it. So I think organisations moving forwards will be really, having to give a bit of attention to the AI Act because that has an even more financial impact if you get that one wrong.
That's super fascinating because, if I play this back, in terms of selling the idea of data and AI governance, so if we kind of think broadly about it, you've mentioned there's some tactical initiatives that are potentially to look at, such as, sort of cost savings due to storage retention and so on. So there's kind of like, feels like there's a checklist of quick actions to do, quick wins that the organization might benefit. But the broader picture, and don't shoot the messenger, Sam, it feels like it's a bit of an insurance policy in some way, is that, there's all these big fines and we don't want that. So, in exchange for not wanting to be there, actually investing in stronger governance ensures that, you're safe, you're robust, and you're not going to potentially fall into trouble. So it feels almost like an insurance policy. Would you describe it differently?
To an extent, it's an insurance policy, but I also think it's the only way that you can get the best out of your data. So if you don't know what data you've got or where it is, then you're kind of going in blind to trying to do any sort of analytics to improve your business efficiency. So yes, there is a big scary stick that you can smack people with to say, if you get this wrong, it's not going to be good. But there's also this really beacon of hope. If you get this right, you're going to have such insight into what the business can do, what it's doing, where the room for improvement is, and more importantly, where the data is. So, some organisations grow at such a rapid speed, and there's lots of different organisations all across, different entities doing different things, different processes. Without data governance, you can't benefit from data in the little silos that you might not be aware of. So it's kind of 50-50, 50% insurance, 50% innovation, I'd say.
Yeah. So the carrot is, by investing in data governance, you're forced to have a clean data architecture, have strong data lineage, which helps comprehension of your data assets, which then increase velocity of bringing data products to your teams, which then helps, potentially with analytics and shipping products. That's kind of like the train of thought.
Absolutely. So data dashboards are what, senior management want to see. And what goes into those data dashboards essentially if you've got rubbish data going in, you've got nonsensical data coming out. And if you want to make data-driven decisions, tongue twister, you really do need to make sure that the data is cleansed and of a good quality before it even reaches your senior managers, because the last thing you want is them looking at numbers that aren't right.
Yeah, great. So you've mentioned a few technical terms which I think the audience would benefit to have a bit of a definition from. So data ownership, data stewardship, data privacy. Would you mind just giving a short definition for each of these terms for the audience?
Sure. So data ownership relates to a single point of contact within the organisation who has responsibility for making decisions around risk to that data and use of that data. So, for example, in a large organisation, customer data may sit with the chief marketing officer because it's the customer record drives sales. So the business may decide that it sits with them. When it comes to your HR data, it could sit with your chief people officer or your head of HR business partner, whatever terminology the organisation uses. But the data owner ultimately makes the call on whether they're happy with initiatives based on the risk profile to go forward. So lots of people feed in before the data owner makes the call. There's lots of teams that would give advice and opinions, and then that data owner would be the one who says yes or no. A data steward is a little bit closer to the data, so they would be working with the data, understand the data, probably understand your systems that use the data as well, and they would be making recommendations to that data owner. So they'd probably be going to all your working groups and data working groups, data compliance working groups, talking about the real life uses of the data that the data owner may be a little bit detached from. And the data steward would come up with the brilliant ideas of how to improve that data. So how they want to use it going forward. It's like a new marketing campaign, going back to the customer record example. They would come up with, if we collect date of birth as well as name and address, we could generate more sales because we'll be able to offer a birthday initiative or incentive. So they then go up to the data owner and pitch the case of all of the revenue driving and all of that. And the data owner would assess it and say yes or no, happy for the data to be used in this way. And off the back of that, all of your compliance checks would then come in with your data privacy team. So data privacy relates to personal data. It can be called data protection, data privacy, very much same and the same. But privacy is actually a human right. So we all have the right to it. But it relates only to personal data, so only the things that people can be identified by. And we all know that there's a lot of data related to ourselves all over the internet. Social media collects all sorts now. So privacy teams are more important than ever, I'd say. Like, I've certainly noticed over the last 5 to 7 years, people asking more questions about their data. It's kind of questioning why things are being collected, especially in lockdown when we had to go to restaurants and when you got to the reservation desk and they would ask you for your name, email, home address, mobile number, all for the contact tracing.
Why do you need all of this?
Yeah, people were texting me going, "So I've just been out and they wanted my home address to eat at this restaurant." I'm like, don't give it. They don't need it. So it's really interesting to see, even my friends, family are starting to say, "Oh, you work in privacy, don't you? Why did they ask me this?" And I love it personally. Being a privacy geek, I love that people are kind of questioning that, because I think historically there has been this mindset of collect as much data as possible. For what reason, we're not sure.
Interesting. Thank you. Those are great definition perspective. So for what reason, at the end of the day, it boils down to making money, right? All those companies want to collect data because they can monetize it. And part of the business model, having a deeper understanding of your customer enables you to sell more. So how do you think about this dilemma, right? On one side, we want to sell more and increase revenue. And for that, we need the more data, the better, because we can personalize the approach to its customer. On the other side is this tension that actually you can't collect all the data you want, right? How do you marry the two together? Is it even possible?
So it's the crux of most of my conversations at this level, to be honest. So data is a company's biggest asset, probably the most valuable asset. That's why you have to be so, so careful with it. So I am all for collecting all the data that you can justify, as long as you are telling people what you're collecting. So privacy notices are the transparency obligation. They are in place to tell people we're collecting your birthday because we want to contact you and offer
But
you
Sam, who reads the privacy notices? You know, it's kind of like
exactly.
one of those just, yeah, accept, move on, right?
Okay. Yeah. But you should, is my advice. You really, really should, because that's where all of the information is about what an organization or company is doing with your information. And that is what organizations can rely upon to say, oh, you didn't. If somebody complains and says, I didn't expect to receive this from you, a company would point you back to the privacy notice to say, but you accepted the privacy, you were provided with the privacy notice at your time of booking or purchase. Here's the information. So I know nobody reads them, and they are way, way, way too long, in my opinion. But there
But
is,
what choices do people have, you know?
yeah,
Because you want to use the product, everybody's using the product, there's a lot of value from the product, and you have no choice but accept it. Otherwise, you miss out, right? We're seeing that a lot now with LLMs, right? ChatGPT, Claude, and so on. You've got to use the product because everyone is on it. You get amazing productivity, but you have to give up, you know, all your queries, everything you've been searching for. So how do you balance that out?
yeah, it's interesting. So with AI particularly, it's really important that somebody remains comfortable with what they're putting into the tool. So ChatGPT, brilliant example. I'm guessing everybody's seen those Barbie doll animations that were all on the social media feeds not so long ago. So they were based on the information that people were putting into them. So the more information you gave away, the better your doll was, or the more relatable your doll was. And that's based on the fact that you provided the tool with more information about yourself, which it's then learning from. I think there's a huge, huge, huge education piece to do. I mean, we're starting to see countries now, I think it was somewhere in UAE, they're actually starting to teach children of 4 about AI. And I think it's quite interesting that at that age, they're gonna be exposed to these kind of tools to learn from and to teach. And there's a huge kind of ethical, I'm kind of on the fence with it. I think it's brilliant because they're gonna need to be able to use it. That's the way the world is going. But also, we need to be teaching them how to use it properly. We need to be teaching people, if you don't feel comfortable giving your name, date of birth, favorite meal, medical conditions to ultimately a technology that is going to learn from it, and you know, you could end up in somebody's search response ultimately, because these tools aren't that mature yet. They're still learning and they're still collecting as much data as they can to then produce the end product, whatever that may be. But this is kind of like the beginning of AI. It's been around for a long time. This is the time when people are actively engaging with it now. So it's learning at a really, really fast speed.
So that is me to the, I guess, the related topic. We've talked a bit about AI, and you were mentioning these ideas of ownership, stewardship, and privacy. Now that generative AI has literally exploded, and we've got so many models that feed off all the data they can consume, right? Internally and externally. How do you think about those concepts, you know, of ownership, stewardship, and privacy, but instead of data, within the remit of models and AI? Are they different? Are they related? What does it mean for, large global organizations?
Yeah, not an easy question. Not an easy question. I'm not sure anybody's actually got it right yet. So I think when it comes to AI ownership, there needs to be recognition that it's a business initiative. So it doesn't just sit with data. It doesn't just sit with the compliance teams. It's not just your legal teams.
Why should it be a business initiative?
So the business ultimately is going to be using it in so many different ways. And there's so many different risks across. So you've got privacy risks, you've got security risks. You've also got things like IP risks, you've got confidentiality risks, you've got brand reputation risks. There's a huge, complicated web of hazards with using Gen
Many
AI.
ways to get it wrong.
There are many ways to get it wrong. Get it right and you can make a fortune. So it's really, really important that all of the right people get in a room and, understand what the business wants to do with it. So for me, use cases are imperative. Like, if you haven't got an example of how the tech is going to be used in practice, there's not much point having the conversation, because you can't understand it. You can't apply the principles of privacy or security to a theoretical use of a technology. You need to understand operationally what you want to achieve. In terms of ownership, I think I've read quite a lot of articles recently where people have said, oh, it should sit with marketing, oh, it should sit with legal, it should sit with the data privacy officer. And you just think it could sit with all of them. If somebody analysed it from a different viewpoint, you get a different answer each time. So personally, I think you need somebody at a very senior level to kind of have general oversight, somebody with an understanding of commercial value and strategy, as well as that.
Should it be the CEO?
If the data literacy is there, potentially. I mean, I think it's really important that whoever makes the call collectively or as an individual on AI use and risk needs to understand technology, understand commercial strategy, and understand a little bit of law, because it's all changing all the time. And it's not an easy job. It's not an easy call. I mean, to be in the seat where it's on you to make that decision would be would be tricky.
It's hard to be a senior leader today when you've got transformative technology like AI. There's an expectation that, you need to know it all and all the subtleties. You've mentioned quite a lot of the things that one ought to think about, the law, the security risk, just broadly data risk, and so on. But yet you have to stay commercial. That's tough.
You need a good team.
You need a great team. So that's a great hook for the next question, right? So at what stage of company do you think you should start investing in a data and AI governance team, and what that might look like? Let's say, here's a couple of scenarios I would love to get your input, Sam. Let's say, you're maybe an SME, a few hundred employees. What should it look like? Or maybe you're a global organization with, 20,000 employees. Any guidance on like what should an investment look like for the data and AI governance team?
Yes, there's definitely no one size fits all. It depends. Again, coming back to your commercial strategy, data governance needs to fit into that, not be a blocker for that. So if you are a very data-driven small company, you probably want to give it a little bit more focus than if you are a larger organization that perhaps isn't so focused on data, isn't collecting masses of data, but is large in size. When it comes to global organizations, I think it is invaluable to have a team that understand regulation globally. So local experts that can provide input into all of your different regional operations to make sure that the team doesn't become a blocker. Because unfortunately, we can't just ignore the law. It is there for a reason. So having people in place that can support by understanding the business strategy can then facilitate things ahead of time. We've all been in those situations where you have to go to external counsel and explain why you're doing what you're doing, and the counsel saying, well, you shouldn't really do that. Or the law says this, and you get your legalese answer back, and it's just like, no. If you're actually in the organisation, you understand the strategy and you understand all the nuances around why the business is doing what it's doing, you can then take kind of more of a holistic look and understand, the law says this, perhaps we could do it this way. Perhaps it would be a different option to consider, maybe not doing it in the way the business would like to do it, but you've got the ability to understand the operational side to make a recommendation that is compliant or is more compliant, less risky. And I think that, from my personal experience working in this field, that has just been an absolute game changer for organisations. When you get your team in place and people trust your team, you will be invited to the meetings early. You will be involved in those important conversations. It can get very expensive and very, very long if you are always trying to explain to an external party what you're trying to do with data and can you please advise us on it. it's very, very, very difficult.
I can imagine. And in that case, what would you say is the best reporting structure or organizational structure to facilitate that? So in other words, where does data and AI governance set? Because, I've seen organizations where they have a chief data officer and data governance would fall under the CDO, or it could be under the CIO. If you think more broadly about, AI governance and maybe data could be a subset related to AI, depending on what the business does with AI, as you mentioned, or it could be with the COO or your general counsel. So how do you think about it?
I've sat in all of those really. So
Great.
I'm kind of having experience there. To me, it doesn't really matter where they sit as long as you've got one. I found it most beneficial sat in the data team personally, because you're a lot closer to that data operational side. You get to see what the data engineers are doing. You get involved in the team meetings. You just hear things in the office. If you're sat in legal, you're kind of a little bit too detached, in my opinion, because legal is generally the commercial legal team. Unless you've got specialists within that team, people will generally come to you for, the contract reviews or legal advice on a HR matter. And you can be a little bit too far away from the data team to have the input that you need. When it comes to things like COO, COO, you're kind of in the right meetings. You might have to just try a little bit harder to get closer to the data team. But I've also seen it sit within the CTO role, under the systems and technology sphere of work. And I think there's benefits to all. I think, it comes down to character a little bit as well. I'm always that person that will say, oh, I'll come to that meeting. If it's an hour out of my day to sit and listen, if that means that I then hear about something that's going to save me the pain of trying to fix it 6 weeks later when it's gone live and it's not got all of the controls I'd expect, I'll do it. You have to have that kind of willingness to listen, willingness to learn, and ability to kind of put your foot in the door and get into the right conversations.
Great. That's a great guidance. So in other words, you want to be close to the action. So,
Exactly.
be close to the data teams where all the action is happening. That seems to be like the right place. Fantastic. Great. So, Sam, I'd love to move to a quick fire round question where I ask you a couple of questions. Love to get your kind of like perspective on different topics. How does it sound?
Yep, let's go for it.
Super. I mean, I'm excited by this one, given our conversation. What is a contrarian view you have in the industry?
I would say that AI is a legal problem. I think AI is an everybody problem. Every article I read, AI seems to be kind of passed over to the legal team, though I don't think that's right. I think everybody needs to understand it and make the call on it.
Super. And you've mentioned a lot that clearly the industry is moving fast, right? Different regulations, different subtlety. How do you stay up to date as a leader? How would you recommend other leaders keep up?
It's not easy, and you cannot act in isolation. Like, I have a fantastic team in place, and they're regionally based, so anything on the ground, any local laws changing, they'll communicate that to the rest of the team. So we're all upskilling all of the time. I think it's really quite naive to think that you can do this job on your own. You need to know, what's changing in technology law, what's changing in data laws, what's changing in your security laws. And you need to be so close to those teams so you can all collaborate and lean on each other to kind of understand half of it, because it gets very, very complicated. But networking is a huge, huge benefit. Understanding people with other people's challenges within your space is really important.
Next, a couple of maybe more personal questions. So, what was your favorite subject at school?
Favorite subject at school? English. I've always loved words, so that's why I went into law.
And final question, what's your favorite music genre?
Ooh, that's a good one. Dance.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Really enjoyed speaking to you today.
Thank you very much.
Great conversation with Sam today. It's quite a lot to reflect on and some really interesting nuggets, right? So we talk about data governance, which essentially encompasses policy processes to ensure that you've got effective management of your data asset in the organization, and also specifically in the context of a global environment where there's lots of regulations that you need to think about. So we talked about what's the ROI of that, right? So that was quite interesting because it's not an easy sell, but it's important to think about it as a carrot and a stick. You've got a stick, which is, there's clearly regulations, so you can get fined if you do it the wrong way. So that's kind of the stick approach. But there's also the carrot. There's benefits you can get out of investing in data governance, some tactical benefits that we talked about. There's some cost efficiency and saving related to data storage and usage. But also through the process of investing in data governance, you're kind of like forced to invest in strong data assets, strong data lineage, really a good understanding of your data architecture that ultimately increases velocity of data products, which then benefits, different business team on how they consume the data so they can go faster to market, get those insights and so on. So that was quite an interesting conversation. Then we also talked about some key principles to think about, this idea of owners versus stewards. So data ownership, really about defining the policy, the risk frameworks, typically sat with a senior stakeholder like the CMO that might be the owner of your consumer data that sits in your CRM. But we also talk about the idea of the stewards. The stewards are, in a nutshell, the implementers, right? Like they make those policies real by maintaining data quality, controls, integrity, and so on. So those are kind of like two concepts that you might want to think about for your business. And finally, it's super clear that because we're in such a fast-moving environment, organizations are having to invest big time in AI literacy, which is really the core of Cambridge Spark mission. AI is not the business of the legal department or the marketing department. It's the business of everybody, every business function, in some words. As a result of that, we live in this world where to keep up, everybody is having to educate themselves, right? So investing in AI literacy is vital in order to achieve business outcomes, but also to help your workforce understand the risk implications of using AI tools and adopting AI more widely across the organization. And at Cambridge Spark, that's what we're all about. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and see you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Data and AI Mastery. If you found value in today's discussion, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an insight from the leaders driving the future of data and AI. And if you're a data and AI leader looking to upskill your workforce with the fundamental data and AI skills to transform your business, Cambridge Spark is here to guide you every step of the way. Be sure to reach out to us on LinkedIn or on our website, cambridgespark.com. Until then, be sure to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with data, and remember, mastery comes with continued learning and action. Until next time, stay ahead, stay inspired, and stay masterful.